Barcelona, early 2000s. He thought he had found the woman of his life, a woman he dreamed of building a home with, raising children, growing old together. But one day, everything that had seemed so solid cracked because of a single, accidental discovery. This story isn't about infidelity as a sudden burst of passion. It's about those fractures you ignore for too long, and then it's already too late. This is the Betrayal channel. Here we tell stories that are usually hidden, stories where the truth is too personal and the wounds are too fresh. Betrayal is rarely sudden. Write to our channel, leave a comment, what you think is important to us. Ordinary Barcelona, 2001, early evening. The sunlight gilds the old facades of the Example. Raul is walking down the avenue, a leather bag with documents slung over his shoulder. He is an architect, 42 years old, works a lot, but always tried to be home for dinner. Flashes of memories, how he and Anna met, how they laughed together at a seaside cafe, how she caressed his cheek in the morning, how they painted the baby's room for their daughter together. I thought we were a team, that even on gray days we held on to each other. Interrogatively, where did our roads part? Barcelona, 1993, autumn. The evening was warm, but you could already feel winter's breath. The narrow streets of Sants smelled of wet asphalt, wine, and spices from the street shops. The lamplight made the house walls glow golden, and between them, dark arches behind which someone else's stories seemed to hide. Raul had just finished another shift at the construction site of a new office complex. In his hands, a dusty backpack with a helmet and blueprints. In his head, fatigue and a strange excitement. His friends dragged him to a small bar where live guitar music was playing and the air smelled of cheap sangria. He sat in the corner until he saw her. Anna entered lightly, as if bringing with her the sea breeze from the promenade. The first thing that caught him was her laugh. Not shrill, not forced, warm, a little hoarse, as if there was room in it for both joy and sadness at once. She was with her friends, talking quickly, gesturing as if every phrase required its own rhythm. She had hair the color of a raven's wing, held up with a simple wooden pin, and slightly chapped lips, a sign that she wasn't used to sitting at home. She's real, not made up, not drawn. That evening they started talking by accident. Someone bumped her glass, a drop of wine landed on Raul's shirt. Anna laughed, apologized sheepishly, and that was how their first conversation began. They talked about everything: Almodovar's films, what had happened to their country after the Olympics, why she hated September when summer was leaving. Raul listened and caught every word, as if afraid she might disappear.
Are you afraid of change?
I'm afraid of not trying.
By morning, when almost everyone had left and the bartender had started wiping down the counter, Anna took out a handkerchief and helped him clean the wine stain on his shirt. That gesture felt strangely intimate to him, as if they had known each other for 1,000 years. At the moment when she straightened his collar and met his gaze, he felt, I want to stay with her, not just today, maybe forever. That thought scared him with its power, but at the same time calmed him, as if everything finally fell into place.
You know, sometimes someone appears in your life who suddenly erases all your previous noise and leaves only the warm, steady beating of your heart. Anna was exactly like that. I realized, this is the woman with whom I will build a home, raise children, grow old. And I won't let myself miss this chance.
They left together. The morning wind from the sea stung their cheeks. But next to her, it was so calm that even the fear of the future seemed unimportant. Ordinary. Barcelona, 1995 to 2000. The years after their first meeting flew by quickly, almost like a mirage. Raul and Anna moved in together after 8 months. They rented a small apartment with a balcony overlooking an inner courtyard, where in the evenings kids played soccer and elderly neighbors watered their flowers. Life felt real, filled with simple joys. Morning coffee in a tiny kitchen, loud arguments about where to go on vacation, the smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery on the corner, the rumble of trolley buses passing under their windows. Raul changed jobs around then. He joined a small architectural firm where he could finally design not just boxes, but homes with soul. Normal. Meanwhile, Anna opened her own jewelry workshop. In those beads, chains, and stones lived her imagination, her boldness, her voice. Their days were full of daily routine, but it was a good routine. They usually woke up at the same time. Anna was always awakened by the first ray of sunlight, and Raul would listen to her humming softly to herself, in front of the mirror. He found that he could never get enough of her presence. Even when she was just sitting on the floor, sorting beads by color, he felt a sense of peace. Ordinary. The birth of their daughter, little Maria, became a new miracle for them. Raul remembered holding her for the first time, that tiny bundle, smelling of milk and something so defenseless. Anna had cried then, from happiness, from fear, from the feeling that they were now bound even more tightly. And even though the nighttime colic, the lack of sleep, the endless loads of laundry exhausted them, they still found time to look at each other. They invented their own little rituals. Friday dinners on the balcony with a glass of wine, Sunday walks to the sea, secret gifts for no reason, just to say, I see you.
I always feared that happiness was something fragile, but with her it felt as solid as stone. I knew I could weather any storm as long as she was near, that together we could stand against anything.
But over time, almost imperceptibly, something began to change. At first, it was little things. Anna started coming home later and later from the workshop. She was more and more silent at dinner. She often avoided his gaze when he asked, "Is everything okay?" Raul chalked it up to tiredness, the child, the business. But inside, a subtle anxiety began to grow, as if the familiar river of their life had shifted its course, and he did not yet understand where it was flowing. Ordinary. Barcelona still kept up its restless rhythm. Tourists walked through the streets, students laughed, street musicians played. But their own apartment already felt different, quieter, more strained, as if someone invisible had settled there, taking up the space between them. Raul would look at Anna in the evenings and catch a strange thought. This is still her, my Anna, but it's as if she's a little further away, as if half of her thoughts now live somewhere else. He didn't want to ask too many questions, didn't want to destroy what they had built over the years, and so he simply waited for her to tell him everything herself. Barcelona, 2003. Outside the window it was raining, as if washing the cobblestones of the old city. Raindrops ran down the window pane, blurring the streetlights, as if someone deliberately wanted to erase from memory what had once been so vivid. Raul was sitting in the kitchen, where everything still felt familiar. The beige tiles, slightly cracked near the stove, a vase with withered daisies, a magnet on the fridge door that read, "Together, forever." Maria, their daughter, was already asleep in a room. Anna had also gone to bed, but he could hear her restless breathing, as if even in sleep, she could not find peace. Raul slowly turned his wedding ring between his fingers. Images from the past played in his mind. How they had met, how they laughed on their first dates, how they built this home, filling it with their habits, how afraid they were of losing each other.
She seemed so real back then. No masks, no other people's expectations. I loved everything about her. Her laughter, her slow morning movements, her ability to speak to me without word.
Raul remembered how they painted the walls of the living room together, accidentally smearing each other with white paint, and how afterward Anna kissed him with such trust, such light in her eyes that he thought, that's her, the one. He remembered their trip to Valencia, how they walked barefoot on the beach, how Anna had said, "If one day everything collapses, I still want to be with you." That phrase still echoed inside him, bitterly ironic now. In the kitchen, only the steady sound of rain could be heard, as if confirming his own sorrow. Raul looked at the cup with the dried coffee stains left since morning. Anna had barely looked him in the eyes for weeks now, too busy with her workshop, too tired, too distant. Inside him lived the hope that this would pass, that they would return to their small habits, sleeping in each other's arms, arguing about who would take out the trash, planning a trip to the Pyrenees. But for now, everything was collapsing, slowly, like an old house no one had bothered to repair. Not from a strong blow, but from a forgotten crack in the wall, growing over the years.
I wanted to believe we could handle it, that there was still room for me in her heart, that this was just exhaustion. just adult life. But every day, she moved a little further away, and I didn't know how to catch up to her.
At that moment, he got up to check on Maria. Their daughter was sleeping peacefully, holding a soft, plush bunny in her hands. Raul gently adjusted her blanket. He looked at her face and felt that for this little girl, he had to try to save the family. Returning to the kitchen, he looked at Anna, sleeping behind the bedroom door. So familiar, so foreign. He knew, if they didn't talk, everything would be over. But where could he find the courage to ask the first, most terrifying question? Night. Rain tapped against the windows of their apartment. Raul woke up. Anna was not in bed. The clock showed 2:47. He got up and found her in the kitchen, typing something on the old laptop. Anna flinched and closed the screen, Anna nervously smiling.
Just work, Raul. Go back to sleep, cariño.
But there was a tremor in her voice. That was the first time I felt that cold in my chest. Something was wrong, but I chased that thought away. Because that was easier. Barcelona, March 2003. The wind was blowing scraps of wet newspapers down the street, and the sky hung low, as if pressing down on the rooftops. Raul left work earlier than usual. His project, the reconstruction of the square near the Ramblas, was moving slowly. Deadlines were tight, but he could no longer focus. One thought pulsed through his mind: something is wrong. He went up to their apartment, slipped the key into the lock as usual, but the moment he stepped across the threshold, he sensed something had changed. The air smelled of a different perfume. Not the sweet scent Anna always wore, but new, sharp, barely noticeable. Anna greeted him with a smile, tight, foreign. On the kitchen table were leftovers from dinner, even though she'd said she hadn't had time to cook. Raul looked at the plate: stuffed peppers, her signature dish, which she hadn't made in months.
Did you cook?
He asked, trying to sound even.
Yes, I just felt like it.
She looked away. Raul felt the chill seep into his heart. They barely spoke over dinner. Maria was doing homework in her room, occasionally peeking out, wary as if sensing the tension between them. When Anna went to wash the dishes, Raul stayed sitting. He stared at a spot on the wall, as if trying to find answers in a crack in the tile. Why? What did I miss? His chest burned with a strange feeling, a mix of shame and helplessness.
I believed I knew her. I believed I could catch any hint of betrayal, but it seems she had learned to hide it so subtly, I became a stranger in my own home.
He went over to the sink, where Anna was rinsing the cups. He watched her hands, they were trembling, but she stayed silent, methodically scrubbing a plate as if she was washing away not dirt, but her own guilt. Raul understood. Whatever was happening, it would soon come to light. Barcelona, a week later. The drizzle had turned into a solid wall of water, and puddles on the streets shone like liquid glass. Raul and Anna were walking home from a parents' meeting at Maria's school. Their daughter had proudly shared her good grades. The teachers had smiled. But between the spouses, there was still a heavy silence. When they reached home, Raul stopped. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely speak. He could no longer carry this burden.
Anna, wait.
She stopped, not turning to face him. Wet strands of hair clung to her cheek.
Tell me the truth. Is there someone else?
He let out the words, and it felt like falling from a great height, terrifying, painful, but inevitable. Anna froze. The silence was longer than the entire downpour.
Raul?
I'm not an idiot, Anna. I can feel it. Every day, you go somewhere. Even when you're standing right next to me. I just want to know.
No, there is no one, but I no longer feel alive here.
Raul clenched his hands so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. He wanted to scream, to blame, to accuse. But instead he said,
Did you ever love me? Really?
Anna sobbed.
I did love you. I tried to love you. But I don't know who I am anymore. I'm lost.
I would have preferred to hear that she'd met someone else. That there was a name, a face, a guilt as clear as a blow. But this was worse. This was emptiness.
They stood there in the rain, soaked to the bone like two strangers, close, but infinitely far apart. Raul reached out, wanting to hug her. She stepped back, and then he realized their home was crumbling not because of passion, not because of some other man, but because love had died, waiting for words that never came. Barcelona, April 2003. A dusty afternoon. The narrow streets of Gracia were already warming up in the spring sun, and above the houses, Laundry lines fluttered lazily. Raul was sitting at a table outside a bar with two friends, Joan and David. He stirred his coffee, though he couldn't taste it anymore. He watched the foam slowly sink on the surface and thought how strange it was. The familiar world was falling apart, and yet everything around him kept moving as usual.
She's changed, you understand?
He finally said without looking his friends in the eye.
Maybe work has worn her out.
David suggested, sipping his beer.
No, that's not it. I can't feel her next to me anymore. It's like someone else is living in her body.
Joan chuckled.
Raul, you always take things too seriously. You're a good husband, but maybe stop overthinking?
Raul fell silent. He had heard that advice 1,000 times. Don't dramatize, don't make things up. But inside there was something that wouldn't let him calm down. Every word Anna said, every glance, now seemed like a code he needed to break.
I feel like I'm standing in a fog, trying to find a wall to hold on to. Where is the truth? Where am I myself?
He took out his phone and scrolled through messages with Anna. Nothing unusual, everything smooth, everything correct. And that made it even scarier. He was no longer afraid of her betrayal, but of losing control over himself. Afraid he was becoming paranoid. When his friends left, Raul stayed sitting alone. People around him were laughing, drinking Aperol, talking about soccer, about summer plans. But he couldn't. Inside him, everything was frozen. He simply didn't know who to trust anymore, except himself.
The next morning.
Early light streamed through the blinds in stripes, landing on the wooden floor of the bedroom. Raul got up early. He hadn't slept. In the familiar kitchen chaos of receipts and notes, he suddenly noticed one envelope. Just a piece of paper, but the writing on it made his heart sink. Hotel Reina Cristina, double room, 2 nights.
Interrogatively, 2 nights?
He whispered aloud, his fingers trembling. He reread the date. February, exactly that weekend Anna had told him she was visiting her sister. His throat went dry. He sat down on a kitchen stool. The world around him suddenly became sharp, like a badly tuned television. He could hear drops of water from the tap, the clink of a spoon in a mug, everything painfully clear.
Interrogatively, what now? Ask directly? Follow her? I will go insane if I don't find out the truth, but if I do, will I be able to live with it?
At that moment, he heard footsteps in the hallway, Anna's. He slipped the receipt into his pocket. She walked in, sleepy in her house robe, with the usual "Buenos dias" on her lips. Raul looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. She was beautiful, familiar, and at the same time frighteningly distant.
Interrogatively, didn't sleep?
She asked, pouring water into the coffee maker.
Woke up early.
He replied. His voice was even, too even. He watched how she moved around the kitchen, automatically setting out the cups, and he understood that this moment was already the point of no return. He could no longer live with her the way he used to. Even if she denied everything, even if this receipt was a mistake, something had died inside him that night. Barcelona, early May, evening. The world around seemed exactly the same as always. The streets breathed in the evening air. Someone on the radio was singing old Spanish pop songs, and the apartment smelled of tomato sofrito. Raul stood by the window. He watched the occasional car driving by, watched the couples holding hands as they strolled. And inside, he felt cold. A strange numbness, as if his feelings had frozen. He knew, today they would talk. He would make her talk. Anna moved around the apartment silently, almost carefully, as if every motion was rehearsed ahead of time. She didn't look him in the eyes. She was tidying up their nephew's toys, the ones they took for weekends, putting dishes away, straightening the couch cushions. The silence between them stretched like a taut string. In his mind, Raul ran through hundreds of possibilities. How would he start? Would he shout? Would he break down? Or would he keep his composure, at least for himself?
I want to know the truth, but I'm afraid of it. What if she says something I cannot bear?
He glanced at the hotel receipt folded in the pocket of his jeans, like the last puzzle piece that would not let him rest. And suddenly he realized he didn't feel rage. He felt emptiness, hollowness, and a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, this was all a mistake. Later that evening, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The overhead bulb burned too brightly, exposing every wrinkle, every nervous gesture. Raul placed the receipt between them. Anna looked at him. There was no surprise in her eyes, only exhaustion.
Interrogatively, what is this?
He asked evenly, almost detached. She didn't deny it. She simply closed her eyes, took a deep breath.
I went there, with him.
Raul felt a sharp pain in his temple. He clenched his fists.
Anger. Why? Why couldn't you tell me?
Anna looked at him for a long moment, as if testing whether he could bear her words.
Because I was dead, Raoul. With you, I had become furniture. Cozy, needed, but lifeless. He made me feel like I still existed. That I could laugh. That I could want.
Raul tried to find words, but he couldn't. His chest tightened so much he could barely breathe. He had thought he was ready for a confession, but the reality still hurt more than any imagined scenario.
Resentment, I gave you everything.
He finally managed, his voice shaking.
Resentment, I was with you, I was honest. I know, she replied softly, and I don't blame you, but I couldn't keep staying silent inside.
He stood up, pushing back the chair, as if to escape. But where? These walls, this life, everywhere was her presence. His eyes landed on the photos on the shelf, the ones of them in their younger days with ice cream on the streets of Seville, happy and in love. How long ago was that? Who were they now?
Resentment. I wanted the truth, but not this truth. I wanted to hear that it could be fixed. Instead, I got a knife to the heart.
Anna didn't cry. Her eyes were dry, as if her tears had run out long ago. Only her voice cracked as she added,
Quiet. I'm sorry. I didn't want to destroy us. I just wanted to feel alive.
Raul didn't answer. He stepped out onto the balcony, into the night. Through the open windows, he heard other people's conversations, the noise of motorcycles, the life that went on. But inside him, nothing was going on. Everything was at a standstill. Barcelona. The next morning, the May sun pushed through the thick curtains, leaving pale stripes on the floor. There was an unfamiliar, frightening silence in the house. Raul woke up on the couch, still in his clothes, the bed untouched. His neck was stiff and his head spun from lack of sleep. In the kitchen, he smelled coffee. Anna had gotten up earlier and by habit put on a pot. He could hear her steps, quiet, almost apologetic. She moved around the house carefully, as if afraid to catch his gaze. On her face, exhaustion and something like shame. Raul stood up, slowly, as if every movement took effort. He walked to the window, looked down at the street, where people were already bustling. Through the street noise, he could hear Anna opening the fridge, putting a plate on the table, pouring herself some water. Those sounds had once felt comforting, homely. Now, like a stranger's music.
Will you eat?
She asked. He only shook his head. There was no appetite left in him. There was nothing left inside him at all.
Yesterday, she told me everything. Too much, and too little all at once. What do I do with that now?
He looked at her, the gaze of a tired man who no longer wanted to fight, but could see no peace either. She looked back at him too, but her eyes were empty, like someone else's windows. After a short, tasteless breakfast, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table. That table had once known their jokes, the children's chatter of their nephews, their plans for summer trips. Today it had become a place of judgment. Anna spoke first.
Raoul, I understand that you won't forgive me. And you shouldn't.
He didn't reply. She continued, her voice trembling.
But I want you to know, I'm not lying anymore. I won't hide anything. I will stay honest.
Raul looked at her, something sharp breaking through in his voice.
Honest? After all this?
Yes. At least now.
He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Words could no longer explain the pain. She sat across from him, fragile, with her shoulders slumped, but somehow finally free. Those minutes felt like an eternity. He wanted to blame her, to smash dishes, to leave, but he didn't. Instead, he said quietly,
I don't know what comes next, but I don't want to hate you.
I'm not asking to come back. I'm asking you to let me stay close. Not for love, but to finish this the right way.
Raul looked at the cup in front of him, at the coffee ring, at the old crack that had appeared many years ago when they moved in. He suddenly realized that cup was like their marriage. damaged but still whole. If no one hit it again,
Maybe we won't stay together, but maybe we can stop lying, at least to ourselves. Stay, but no more lies.
for the first time in a long while, Anna allowed herself a smile. A weak one, but a genuine one. Barcelona, a week later. May was coming to an end, and the city smelled of the sea and fresh fruit from the market. Raul was still sleeping on the couch, even though there was a clean, empty bed next to him. He woke up in the middle of the night and her words still echoed in his head, like an echo. It seemed everything had already been said, but every night he replayed those confessions again, like a record scratched by time. He went to the kitchen, poured himself some water, looked at his phone. No messages. Anna used to text him even from the other room, just to joke around. Now, silence. Raul felt a wave of fear rise inside him.
What if I can never trust her again?
Two voices argued in his mind.
Forgive her. Start over. Don't be a fool. She betrayed you.
He went back to the couch and looked at a photograph, the one from their first trip to Valencia. She was laughing there. He was too. Was it all a lie? He didn't know the answer, and that made it hurt even more. The next morning, Anna got up early. She cleaned the kitchen, made coffee, and called Raul to the table. Her voice was still shaky.
Can I show you something?
He nodded silently. She took out a notebook, old, worn. Inside were her thoughts from the past few years, scribbled down in secret just to keep herself sane. She opened to a page from several years ago and read aloud.
I'm afraid of losing him. I'm afraid that if I tell him, he'll leave. I don't want to lie, but I don't know how to tell the truth.
Raul listened, every word cut like glass. But behind that glass, he could see it wasn't a game, but a desperate panic. Not a defense against him, but an attempt to protect herself. He didn't interrupt, didn't slam the door. He just sat there and breathed. She kept reading, tears dripping onto the pages.
She's not making excuses. She's afraid. And me? I'm afraid to forgive her.
When she finished, he didn't know what to say. There were no words, but he put his hand on hers, not to win her back, but to say, I hear you. And for both of them, that was a first step towards something. Maybe not toward love, but at least toward honesty. Barcelona, August. The city pulsed with summer noise. Kids running through the squares, saxophone music on the streets, the smell of paella and the sea. 2 months had passed. Raul was still living in that apartment, but he no longer slept on the couch. He and Anna were trying to talk. Not like before, with jokes and light touches, but slowly, carefully, as if learning a language all over again. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they went days without speaking. But there were no more secret messages or lies. There was truth, heavy, uncomfortable, but theirs. Daniel, their son, had grown calmer. He came home from soccer practice, dropped his bag, peeked into the kitchen, and smiled because he saw Mom and Dad sitting at the same table again. Sometimes, like in the old days, they went out for ice cream together, and that small ritual brought back a sense of family, even if it was no longer perfect. Sometimes love doesn't die. It hides under resentments, under fear, under lies. But if you give it a chance, it can rise again, weak but alive. No one is obliged to forgive, but anyone can try to understand. Raul stepped out onto the balcony, coffee cup in hand. He looked out at the street where children were playing. Anna came over and lightly touched his shoulder. They said nothing, and that was enough.